Cool. So we have these calls quarterly, and usually what we've been doing with them is just checking in on goals that we wrote down. I really, really admire this group for not having ridiculous goals. We have goals that are just like, meet once every quarter and have a website and this sort of thing. I thought that this would be a good time, because it's been about a year since the annual goals were set, to start thinking about what we want to do over the next year as a group. And it doesn't have to be the same as what we were doing. Most of what we've been doing over the last year in terms of actual point of fact action as data together is a reading group. And that works really well for some folks, but for other folks it might not. It might be not urgently practical enough, or it might be, I don't know. So I'm really curious to gather information in this call, including new faces, on what people want out of data together, what we want to be as a group, what will be the most useful interaction that we could have, and then we can try to design the activities for the next year around those ideas. And this is not intended to be like the moment of goal setting. This is the beginning of the conversation. I imagine we'll want to do goal setting at the in-person meeting that is coming up next month. Am I right? Yes, next month. So the exercise for this is I put a link for the annual goals this year's annual goals into the agenda. And I want folks to look at them and reflect upon them. And yes, you can reflect even if they weren't your annual goals. And write down somewhere in your own space, either on a piece of paper or digitally somewhere, write down just what looks good, helpful, or useful out of this list. What doesn't go well, what's not a good goal, or what's challenging. That can be the beginning of our conversation. Any questions? And thanks for sharing the link, Brendan. How are folks doing? All right. Would anyone just like to give some initial impressions? Oh, Michelle, do you want to talk about your suggestion real quick?
I didn't want to derail. It was just, I think we've done some of these, so we could put links, unless there's already something somewhere else that has that already. That works too.
I don't think there is. That sounds like a great idea.
Be cool. Ship.
Not just that, but like actually recognizing things that we accomplished.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a really good plan. Any impressions folks want to share? Brendan?
Yeah, it's so fun to read a document that you worked on a year ago and like you're like, did we do any of this? And yeah, I'm heartened. There's a couple of things that down here that like didn't get done, and I could choose to be like negative about that, like GitHub organization cleanup. But to me, that's like so pales in comparison to the progress that was made on like the fact that we kept doing the reading group this year, the fact that we actually got some of this, we accomplished some of this turning the reading group into blog posts thanks to very incredible work on that part of Kelsey and Kevin. So yeah, I'm generally feeling pretty excited. I want to leave space for others because I've seen this and I feel very close to this conversation already.
Kevin, was that a hand? Nope, not a hand.
But I mean, I was just shaking my wrist, but I guess like it's nice that these goals were like small and concrete, but I feel like I want us to do more. And that's like a weird thing to say because it's like capacity, but also like that whole practical part. It's like, how do we really expand on this beyond just blog posts?
Can I ask you what you mean by more?
I think the direction that we've talked about before of actually testing like different protocols and software and stuff with use cases and writing about that, it's just a tad bit more, but not beyond our scope, you know.
Can I add to that?
Yeah.
I know I wasn't supposed to jump in, but whatever. Yeah, I think I agree with Kevin. I think there's room to be a little, just like careful, just inch a little bit more ambitious onto this. And I think if there's one place to be a little critical, it's this like tell the world who we are and how to engage with us. I think this like outreach side of things could definitely do for some improvement, mainly because like from very little work, we're getting a lot of like folks who seem to be interested in the space and interested in the spaces that we've created to have this conversation. And so to me, that feels like we should just do it justice a little bit. But part of me also means that is very mindful of capacity, organizational capacity, and trying to understand how a lot of the conversations we've been having in Edgy, I think, impact this. Like the OAR model to me, is that the one? God, I've had too many acronyms, but that one to me really strikes as a very useful conversation to maybe introduce as part of this.
For hands, I saw, Kevin, did you have yours up? And then Michelle.
Yeah, just quickly a response. One thing I would add is that like the engagement that we've been seeing is because we've been going out in like public spaces and talking with people, and that's how we've been able to like see Jackson and Mauve and stuff like that. So if we could add that instead of just only online presence and only online engagement, I don't think that's where we want to stay.
Michelle?
Sorry, that face I just had, I was like, somebody should be taking, I was supposed to be taking notes. Sorry, so I'll get back on that about the engagement of that. Sorry, I might rewatch this part. The hand was on. Oh, it seems like, so reading through what we accomplished off that list, it seems like we did very well on the things that we had, actions for in that doc, and also were things that, oh, thank you, Brendan. Switching at the moment. Don't miss Kevin's thing about outreach and engagement, and maybe that being a thing. Things that at the beginning of the year we already had a good idea of how to accomplish. Like we said, oh, we were good at doing this reading group thing and we really enjoy it, let's do that. The blog posts, of course, you know, it was because you and other folks had time, it actually invested the time to do it. And that was like, you could control that inside of like your time and you can do the thing. If we think the other stuff is more important this year, maybe then what gets on the list is the time that we would have spent doing reading groups or something. We take the first couple months of that and say we would have spent 3 hours meeting together to do this thing. Like if we sat and did a co-work on the website for 3 hours, we could probably do a lot of work, or make a plan to do outreach or whatever it is. Do a little switch for a little bit if we think that's the most important thing to do this year. And sorry, to finish that thought, and make sure the action bit of it gets put into the plan, since our brains are very tired and we check in on these things once a quarter. So if we have our little to-do list, which we did a pretty good job of last year, but yeah, maybe switch up the things that get the focus.
I can go. It kind of skips around a little bit. Jackson, I saw your note about the Twitter account, not seeing a link to that on the site, which there probably isn't. And then also, I don't have access to the Twitter account. I think only Dawn does, but she hasn't come to a meeting in a while. So we've got a little bit of stuff like that going on. I'm really curious what folks think about the public face, like the need for it, because we've done, like Brendan said, we've done so little active outreach. It's a little anything, honestly. Just we've been doing just like a really thin core of work, and that has been enough to generate a fair amount of interest. And so I'm kind of proud of us for honestly not having a Twitter account and trying to manage social media presence. But on the other hand, I'm like, but these should get more play. Personally, the thing that stuck out to me on this goals list was there was a lot of stuff about official language and formalizing things. And I thought that was kind of funny because it feels really different from what we care about. On the other hand, I am curious if we have official processes for like bringing new members or member organizations into this group. And that seems useful to formalize, and decision-making always feels useful to formalize. My one other thought, and these are unfortunately very disparate thoughts, so you'll probably lose track really fast, but the reading group, I love it as a tool, like as a member of Data Together more than as like a person who's trying to develop vision for Data Together. I really love it because it gives me space that I don't otherwise get to try and think on a much broader level, think about themes and ethics and values and why we do, like at the very basic level, why we build technology, and why and how we connect with one another as humans and as organizations. And it's really, really neat to be able to reserve some time as part of this group to feel like on my list of things that I should do, this is going to matter to somebody if I actually read and think about this. Jackson, did you have your hand up earlier?
Yeah, I wasn't really sure what the whole raise your hand protocol was, but I also see people doing this periodically, which I assume is like snaps or like claps, right?
That is sign language applause. Good guess.
Cool. Yeah, I actually just wanted to second what you said about like having a public face and getting like more people involved. I was curious to know what y'all's like goal with that is, if any. And like my knee-jerk reaction to hearing that was like, oh, do you have something for these people to do? Like what's going to happen when they show up at your door, asking what's going on, asking how they can help and wanting to like get involved? And like, will that be disruptive, or is there a path for them? Or yeah, just how you think about that.
Can take a stab at it. I think that in this case, there has definitely been an evolving answer to that question over time. We started with like, yes, we want you to show up and we want you to build technology. That was from the beginning of it. And very quickly realized that, but at the same time, from the beginning, we agreed that this should be a space that equally honors both sort of technical thinking and the social implications of technical thinking, and trying to really focus on keeping that intersection central to whatever conversation, whatever project is undertaken that data together. I think over time, this might be me stepping a little bit, I don't want to speak up for anybody else, but it feels like with the emergence, at some point the reading group started and we started to sort of really dig in and think about sort of what the purpose of our gathering was, and realize that I think Kelsey just articulated it kind of wonderfully. Is to hold a space for many of us who are around this area of decentralized thinking or thinking around decentralized systems to develop and cultivate our own knowledge and understanding of both each other and the kind of work that we're doing. To me, that's been, ideally that would be the ask of someone. It's just like, if you want to join us, you're here to sort of engage critically with decentralized stuff.
Does anyone who hasn't spoken up yet want to share about their thoughts on the last year of Data Together? And John, since I can't see you, if you do raise your hand, just use the chat, please, if you want to.
Yeah, yeah, I don't actually have many strong reflections on the last year, as I've only been involved for the last hour. Yeah, it has been interesting. Yeah, I mean, I've perused through some of the reading, and just to kind of echo some thoughts that other folks have said previously, I think it's really cool also just for like an aggregation space of like interesting thoughts and perspectives that I personally wouldn't have come across in my own just like day to day.
Yeah, Michelle?
In response to what several of you just said, to me it feels like what in grad school people called a workshop. You'd go to you'd be in a workshop that I suppose was meant, I suppose that word, I don't know, those of you who have done PhDs and things might know more better than I, but to represent like an artist workshop, except in this case it's an intellectual workshop. So it's a place where, in a field that doesn't always value that sort of space, to give that space. So I think the people that stick around tend to be interested in it. So I don't know if we need to support people in a different way other than providing the space and advertising it a bit more so people know what it is and what it's like and the different areas they might engage, which might only be, we have this call and here's some reading, and also here's some blog posts and maybe some help wanted, like help us edit these blog posts or please repost them, or who knows. Yeah. Right now anyways.
Yeah.
So one thing that, I don't know if this is like a core part, but one thing that I've found super valuable as I've been doing some research on like things for protocol labs where we might plug in with like Filecoin, has been like the ways in which like Kelsey and Kevin, you guys have been helping like coordinate some of the people where like for the ESIT meeting. And like even the last call that we were on, Kelsey, where we were talking to Ruth, and then, I mean, Brendan, fun fact, you will be getting a ping from Kelsey later about some stuff that we were talking about with Ruth. But also just like using this as a space to also like maybe surface some signal as we're touching these different organizations and like places where there might be open challenges, and figuring out what are the ways in which, as we're doing all this thinking, and also as technologists, what are ways in which we can like either identify what the problems are, and maybe this is where the outreach piece matters a bit too, where it's like, maybe we don't personally have capacity, but also just like servicing the signal that we gather, so it's not just like lost in the void. Because I do think we're in a unique position where either there may be the opportunity for our organizations to do something, or we just want it to be captured and known. So if other people are interested or passionate, they could pick up that work too.
I do have another exercise that it feels like we're flowing into the space of, where we just looked at the last year. So of course the next thing is to take a minute and write about what this group could provide to us or our org, or both of them written separately on your piece of paper. Is there anyone who wants to contribute to this reflection conversation before we go into that exercise? Okay, is that exercise clear? The question is written down, but what is the best role Data Together might play for you or your org in the next year? Is everyone finished? Does anyone need more time? It's okay if you need more time, but it's easier if you say. Okay, I'm gonna assume we're ready then. Would anyone like to go first? I can. I had 4 thoughts. One is I really like, as I mentioned, the high level discussion and articulation of values that we do. I'd love for Data Together to continue to be that space for me. And I really hope that that's something that's valuable to other organizations too. Like that's what I would most love this organization to be, is that place where values live. I also like I want it to have the role of continued partnership. I feel like Data Together occupies a really cool space of just enough touch point with different organizations that you feel like you actually can call up the other folks on there and have a connection to somebody at such and such org. And this is connected. The next thought was I love the role of Data Together not really asking me to do anything, not trying to produce something in particular. That's so rare and so cool. And it's it's really nice. I don't want to disrupt that. But my final thought sort of contradicts it, which is I'm personally for Edgy looking into doing some research into distributed web protocols. And I think John, Rob, Kevin, and Brendan have all seen my output from that, or Enrico too, where I spent a 3-hour hack trying to find a data set and then put it onto a couple of different distributed web places, and then write that up and try to turn that into feedback that I could give to folks. And then ideally continuing that work, I would do a write-up for the other side too, of people who want to store data. And that's a pretty big project that I don't anticipate getting a lot of help on. But if there were folks within Data Together who were excited about helping with that, I think it could go a lot further. But again, I don't want to make it a thing that people feel obligated to Data Together and then feel guilty and or burdened by their work for Data Together. Yeah, Michelle?
As a side note to that, I might be able to help with if IPFS is one of them, or probably John's interested in the Filecoin one. So at least you can, from that perspective, maybe not data together, but this would be a good place to find the people and then maybe individually as work do the thing. But that's awesome.
Rico?
Yep.
I was going to say, I think in terms of both personally and professionally for Query, I'm kind of hoping that data together can be / continue to be a forcing mechanism for our company to have the kinds of conversations that many companies, once they screw up, begin to have. A lot of popular articles come out once a company's done something dumb or something's happened that, you know, the founders never put any time into thinking about this or never took the time to understand this aspect of the issue, of the problem, of the question, of the technology, of the unintended consequences. And so I think as we are building Query into what we want it to be and what we want our users, what our users want it to be, that's going to come with a lot of unintended consequences, that some of which we can predict and some of which we can't. And so I really hope that the conversations that we have allow us to think about what it means to be a data steward and a good data steward, and how technology enables that or prevents that or gets you into trouble or whatever. At least this will be an opportunity for us to make sure that we've thought about those things.
Yeah, my reflections are basically kind of a reiteration of everybody else's. Maintaining these connections that we have with these disparate communities is really interesting. That like Edgy sits alongside Protocol Labs, sits alongside Query. It's great. It's great that we can all like, just talk to each other when we need to. And also yeah, technology is not going to save the world, but it's a multiplier of effort and signal. So how do we use that in a positive way? And then I really want to, everybody here seems to care about decentralization, even though we might not all agree on what that means right now. But then communicating why do we care about it so much would be like something I would really want for us to be able to do with clarity.
Michelle?
This one was a difficult question for me in a sense, because I feel in my, I think what this group does is important to Protocol Labs, for example. I'm not sure Protocol Labs is in a place where it can have the conversations yet about some of the concerns that we have as a group, but I think that's really important. I'm not sure what the best connection place that is for, but I think a lot of people in this group are better at making those connections than I am. As I always tell folks, like, I'm the one you want shipping the thing. I'm not the one you want like finding the other like thing over there that is the connection. That's a little bit of a different brain space. So I really value being able to come here and listen to how you all connect the problem space that we all care about. And then that often sparks a thing where I'm like, oh yeah, I can do that. Or I can, you know, make that connection over there and make it be a thing. So that was a little bit of like me personally versus the company and all that, but that's where my little slice of life is. Yep. And also I feel like maybe I can be of more use to other people in this group rather than maybe going the other way in that case. Since the Protocol Labs, since I work for them in particular, and they're such a big open source project with lots of different pieces and not super great at organizing, it's often like, what the heck's going on in there? And if you say something, I'd be like, wait, I know where that thing is, and send it over, or I can connect you to this other thing. And that seems like a useful thing for the conversation.
Jackson?
Hey, I figured out the hand protocol. Yeah, I think I kind of have a similar thoughts to Michelle. Like, I am relatively new to this space. I've been doing web development for a really long time. And then like slowly realized through working with startups that actually the web is being used to do terrible, awful things. And then I got really depressed about it and didn't want to do it. And now I'm realizing that there are a bunch of people who are trying to fix it, which is rad. So I don't know, I'm like a novice in this space, but I have a lot of technical skills to bring, and I would like to spend a lot more of my time focusing on taking power away from large institutions and corporations and putting it back into the hands of individuals and small communities, and like supporting those individuals and small communities building the tools that they need like for themselves. So Data Together seems like a place for me to like meet people who are already thinking hard about these problems and like need extra hands or extra help in whatever way. And I'm hoping to, yeah, find out what that is and learn more and start contributing.
I just thought of when you were speaking about taking power away from larger organizations, the like directness of that phrasing really reminds me of the broader community that we sit in. And like a number of us from, I think Rob and Kevin and I and some other folks from Data Together more broadly, and went to DWeb Camp this summer south of San Francisco, which was hosted by the Internet Archive. And that was kind of the sentiment of the basically everyone there. And it was really cool to show up and have people be having these conversations about what it means to be a citizen in the world and on the internet in particular. Like, what are the value ethical frameworks around the different modes of developing either free open source or company backed, and how does that impact the way in which these things are developed. And it was really, really cool. And it made me think of like Kevin's earlier idea to do more outreach and engagement. But like a space like that is a place where Data Together folks can go and meet each other, but also meet people who ought to be in these discussions too. I know, Kevin, you're going to, what is it, Our Networks? Is that right? In Toronto this weekend.
Yeah.
And then
Kevin, you going to Our Networks?
Yeah.
I'll see you there, dude. Sorry.
Oh,
obvious
sorry. I forgot I was supposed to connect you. Hector's going, Cluster, Hector. So you have to meet, Brendan, you know him, right? Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I'll make
Can you intro him to Kevin?
Sorry, let's,
Yeah, okay, cool. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry. I didn't mean to do that for like weeks.
Yeah.
Sorry. Make sure Kevin meets him. Thank you.
You get it.
Kevin, we'll do it.
But like, I would love if we could do a little bit more of consciously meeting around spaces where we might already be converging, like DWeb Camp, like Our Networks. And I think we're planning the annual meeting to be just after Radical Networks in New York. Is that right? Which is really cool, because I showed up at DWeb Camp and people were having these conversations. I was like, these are the conversations I wish people in general had. And it feels like you've all done the homework before showing up here, which is so rare. And I feel like I wouldn't have felt like I'd done the homework without this group and all the reading group stuff that we'd done. So it was really amazing to be like, living that vision to some degree.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, honestly, the DWeb experience was like life-changing, and that's how I met Jackson, who's like 2 hops away. Like, we met through somebody like in between from DWeb, and it was just like random. And so yeah, like being in the physical space with people who care about these same issues is just nice and important, and makes you not feel alone in the world.
Yeah, I would second that. It was so nice to meet you, Kevin, because I felt like this was a thing that I had been thinking out a lot about on my own, and like kind of just lamenting the state that the world is in. And then to like meet other people who had been thinking the same things and were like working on solutions was like really inspiring, and like definitely gave me a lot of hope. So thanks.
Yeah, Brendan? Or no?
Yeah.
Does anyone else want to share about their intentions for Data Together, or their dreams for Data Together, I guess I would say, for the next year? Yes.
All right, I'll jump in this time. Yeah, I do. I in the theme of like not asking too much, I do just hope we continue to do the thing we do well. Personally, I feel like that's one of the things that consistent themes that came here when we started this thing. We were like, this was like very post data rescue, and the question that I kept asking was like, I'm trying to realize, I'm trying to work on a future that I don't understand yet, and I need as many smart people around as possible to help understand it. And so, yeah, I think I have no problem just restating the thing that I want for next year is to just continue to put in the time that we need to make sure that we hold that space for each other.
It seems to me like folks have pretty convergent intentions, which is nice. I'm curious if anyone wants to continue like in this exercise. You're welcome to raise your hand and I'll call on you immediately. But I'm curious how folks want to spend the remainder of our meeting together, given that we have this relatively long meeting. I think they're designed to be not just speaking meetings, but also working meetings in case there is work that we need to do. So I have space in the agenda for any work around scheduling the annual meeting that's coming up. And we also have space for partner updates for folks to share from their organization what might be relevant to this set of people. I don't think that's actually going to take the entirety of the rest of the meeting. So I'm curious if there's anything else we want to throw on there. For example, Michelle's idea from earlier of linking to the stuff that we've done from the goals might be a quick, productive exercise.
Giving that thumbs up, but I don't think I actually have anything. I mean, I can, it's like, yeah, you go find your links, you know? It's not so nice.
Sure, Brendan?
Yeah, I actually think we could totally eat up the rest of the time with the annual meeting planning, given that there's some things I'd like to throw on the table for discussion. Mainly because Rico and I have been doing some work on this, but we do need to table some of this just for others to know about. And I think I'm really excited about the annual meeting, but I want to make sure that we take the time to clarify some expectations, know what's going on, and so that we can properly set the agenda for that conversation. And so I definitely think we can eat up a bunch of time there. I have a couple of things I'd like to throw on the table as like themes that we've been talking about. But Kelsey, I'll leave it to you on when we schedule that. But I think we can eat a ton of time on like the annual meeting.
No, that sounds really good. In that case, why don't we flip the order of the other two things? So let's go through partner updates so that we can make sure that we have the space to do that. And then I'll turn the rest of the meeting and moderation over to you, Brendan. Does that sound good? Cool. So for partner updates, what we've typically done is just had each of the 3 official partner organizations give a brief update on what they've been working on, where they are in their process. I was trying to focus the question a little bit more specifically than we usually do, because like, give me an update on your org for the last quarter is kind of a lot. So the question focus is more, what have you been working on that would be interesting or useful for others here to engage with? And I think it would probably make sense to have an update from Edgy. I don't know if we want to do subgroups of Edgy at all, because we've got, I don't know, one of you 2 or 3, please take that one. But then we have Query and Protocol Labs, and John, I'm assuming you want to do Filecoin separately?
I'm nodding.
Great, cool. Yeah, would anyone like to go first? Sorry, I flipped screens for a second. Did I see a hand? Yeah, Michelle.
I might as well talk. That's fine. And it'll be more of a conversation maybe too, because I'm not sure what's super helpful, but at a super high level, something that folks might not know, Protocol Labs has 3 major projects at the moment. 2 are maybe the biggest, but actually maybe the important thing for you all to know is that the 3rd one is catching up in size and intensity and all that. So it's IPFS, Interplanetary File System, then libp2p, library peer-to-peer, which now maybe has as many people on it as IPFS. Anyways, quite a bit. So they pulled the peer-to-peer connectivity bit of our ecosystem out into a separate library and made it officially a separate project. It's been doing that for a while, but it's just grown a lot in the last year. So FYI, that's a thing. And then there's Filecoin. As for update on what really high level, what IPFS is focusing on, a lot of it this quarter and last quarter has been core performance improvements, or like trying to figure out how to work as a team that acts more like a product team and can actually ship improvements to the protocol and at a reasonable speed and this kind of thing. So it is getting better. For those of you who've tried to use it at any time in the last year or two, you've probably been frustrated by a thing or two. But right now we've got teams specifically around developing a test net so we can actually test things before they're pushed out. You may have experienced some breakage in a couple of our recent updates to Go IPFS, but hopefully that'll get a little bit better. We've got a team focused on our gateway, so hopefully websites that are loaded over IPFS will load at a reasonable speed instead of what's happened in the past, which is, why would you use IPFS? I can't even access the stupid website. I've got a team on that, and some various other things. But let's see, do I know anything about libp2p and what they're focusing on? No, I can't give you an update there. Do you want me to pause? You can ask me anything about that, or I can also let Jonathan give you a quick update on what's going on the Filecoin side of life, which is our biggest project, I would assume now. I think it probably has the most people on it. Yeah.
I think in terms of Protocol Labs contributors, it might be the most. I don't know if it's the biggest. It's definitely not as big as IPFS or libp2p in terms of
like large, like Protocol Labs employees, I suppose full-time employees, it might be the biggest, but yeah. Well, here, John, go ahead. If there's a high-level thing that you want to share with group, just so they know, go for it.
Yeah. So, I mean, the exciting thing is unfortunate that I can't share it externally yet, but I will say in the next few weeks, there's going to be a lot more communications about things that are materially changing for the Filecoin project in a very exciting and positive way. So stay tuned. That being said, the exciting thing for this past quarter has been, I think we've been kind of doing, so for context, I work on the non-dev side of Filecoin, so a lot more is figuring out just ecosystem and how do we make sure all this other stuff gets aligned properly. So for me personally, I spend a lot of time talking to other organizations, some in the distributed space, some that are just cultural institutions, some that are academic institutions. And I think and obviously scientific ones too. But there's these really interesting common themes. And I think what's cool is even outside of our core group of people who work in the decentralized space, there's a number of people who are concerned and worried about what is happening with the internet. So I had a great conversation with CERN 2 weeks ago, and they also obviously care very deeply about the internet. And one of their main concerns is, what's happening with the centralization of the web. And you talk to other researchers and folks at universities, and they see their computing departments getting shrunk. And there's a lot of questions about what does this mean and the implications of having all of science's data live on private servers that yes, it's a thief, but what does that mean? So I think for me, it's been exciting just to see the number of people who are excited about distributed technologies. And even though it's nascent, and for us, there's still a lot to build, the appetite for people at least wanting to experiment with some of this stuff is pretty encouraging. So to take it back to Protocol Labs and Filecoin, there is going to be some bigger announcements coming in the nearish future, which I can make sure folks in this group are aware when those are publicized. But then, other than that, there's just been a lot of pairing and focus to figure out what are the specific things that we're going to ship and what time, which has greatly streamlined the efforts that we've been undertaking. So, yeah.
Yep. And I suppose I should also give a okay, if you're not familiar with those projects or not familiar enough, we've got IPFS was completely open source. It's a protocol, a content address peer-to-peer networking protocol. Filecoin on the other side is an incentive layer to a distributed system like that. While they're both under the auspices or supported by Protocol Labs as an organization, they technically don't have to go together. You could use one or the other with or without one or the other. So we often talk about them together. And in a lot of places, people are like, well, IPFS, that's clearly just all about like Filecoin stuff. It's like not a thing. So FYI. They are together, but also separate. But similar problem space, as you can tell. So it's exciting to hear all this work that John's been doing on the biz dev side, and talking to all the folks, and it's great. Okay, but questions, anyone? I'm sure if you have questions about the huge ecosystem of confusion that is Protocol Labs, you can also use this moment to ask.
Brandon?
I think it'd be fun to schedule a Q&A around this, to be honest. I feel like there's like, I would dig in for a bunch, but then I kind of feel like we have like, the time for the questions doesn't feel right.
That's fair. We can schedule that as well as an action later, or just Brendan, it's like.
No, I think it'd be a great data together thing. Yeah. Like,
yeah, sure.
I think it's in line with Kelsey's research recently.
Good point. Yep.
I think this is a good moment to say, by the way, that in theory, Edgy is an equal partner with the other partners. And though I have been moderating and managing all the meetings, there's no actual reason for that other than like, I'm into it. So if anyone wants to call a meeting or an event, please do.
Yeah, we're still going to get an Edgy update. Does anybody want to give one? Kelsey, Kevin?
I guess I can give the update. I'm probably doing the most stuff that touches it anyway. There's a couple of different pieces that we're working on. Archiving group within Edgy is, and has been for a year, very, very small. In theory, it's mostly like me, and Brendan is stepping into a more query, less edgy role soon. And anyway, our project, our capacity is small, but our project space is huge. And we've been working on kind of identifying 3 parts of data storage, and one of them is to do with identifying what data needs to be stored. So we've been working on partnerships in that space with Science to Action community, the ESIP, and environmental, I don't remember any of the acronyms. ESIP is about earth sciences, and they're mostly scientists, and they care about like NASA and NOAA data sets a lot. And PEGI cares about federal data that is stored, born digital. You all know some of these acronyms, whatever. The point is we've been showing up at their meetings and getting involved in their work more and more to try to make sure that we're on the same page about like trying to understand what data gets saved. And this is why like John and I just got off a call with Ruth from ESIP earlier today, is Edgy wants to be, and Edgy archiving being like largely me, wants to be in the space of bridging folks who have use cases with folks who need people to test their new projects. And kind of in the middle of that, because the technology is still pretty hard to use, is me and or us testing stuff out and seeing what can be communicated in both directions. I would say the other thing that Edgy's working on that is relevant, no, I think it's mostly that. It's the partners, and then it's the actual work of trying the different protocols and sending data to places. And one thing that's been really nice actually is Terry, who's been doing Proto School for Protocol Labs, emails me when she's got a tutorial, and I don't always have time to check it out, but I generally try to. And like Brendan and Rico have been sending me query stuff when it's ready to try out, and I'm pretty into that. I think that that's a really cool like method of knowing when it's worth spending time looking for a new tutorial. I won't necessarily do it, but it feels like a useful role. I also will do a brief shout out here that if any of you swing through Seattle near the end of a month, I host a decentralized web meetup, and we could use content. And I think we're going to try and have a Filecoin one with the developers who live here this next month. Brenda, did we actually hear about Query?
No, I'm happy to give an update. Yeah, cool. Apologies for dominating so much of this conversation, everybody. So I'll try to keep this a little bit brief. Query has been, we've hit leg 2 of our life. We survived long enough to make it to leg 2, so we're very excited. And so the first, for as long as I've been talking to a lot of you, has been this like, Query is an R&D project. Can we understand and materially advance some of the underlying technology to make a move forward on the way that we version and talk about trust in data? And we felt like we did a lot of that, and now we're making a product. We're trying to make a product that realizes that. So it's kind of high level, but I think for this group, I really want to stay focused on that question that Kelsey put forth of, I want to relook it up, where is it? Oh no. That like what's relevant to this group. And so what's relevant to this group is like, just as like a direct example, we have really struggled with, in this productization phase, with the notion of, we have something that we call the registry, and we're now going to relaunch that as a product called Query Cloud, which is a centralized system. And that centralized system has needed to exist. At first, we actually couldn't get around problems like unique usernames and search. We actually couldn't figure out how to do those in ways that were meaningful. And so that was sort of the beachhead at the beginning of this conversation. But I'm quite proud of the way that we have come forward with this registry conversation and the way that we're using it. But we have had to make a number of changes that I would love to talk about with this group at some point, about how we sort of are trying to drag a decentralized world forward and connecting it to a bunch of patterns that work really well and are really tried and trusted, and meet user expectations far more sort of like where they are, right? And so the idea that right now you can go to query.cloud/B5 and you just see something that looks a lot like a GitHub profile of data sets, and that you can publish that. But we're trying really hard, and one of the hardest things about the things that I'd be most proud of about our next release that's coming up in the beginning of October is this, like, at the same time we will launch the capacity to publish to cloud as we will to another peer on the internet. And so you can, at both, ideally you'll be able to say, cool, push this data set to this centralized thing that provides you some conveniences, but also push this data set to a peer on a distributed network that I trust. The second one will be far more advanced, but we're trying to make it as not advanced as possible. Getting that right is tough. It requires a lot of new UX work in particular, and I feel like bringing the UX conversation forward is something that I really hope to sort of surface around this group, because like actually building UI, like we just chatted through, we took a run through the whole thing on Monday, and like, what do you call the word for pull a data set from some other machine to your machine? It's like a genuine question. Like, do we use git pull? Well, everyone agrees that git is a little bit confusing. And anyway, so I know this isn't like an update, but like I wanted to instead use this time to just talk about how much Data Together's conversations have like directly impacted what we're making and had like a material sort of guidance to the way that we talk about what trade-offs that we make. And so, yeah, replicate. Oh, Kevin. Anyways, I guess that's our update. I'm delighted to have, and that's why I kind of reemphasize having this space, is because as an open source project, it's really nice, but as like because we are also a for-profit company, we have to ship something that a lot of people use, like, and the way that we do that means that we have to make some very careful concessions. And so I think it would be really fun to talk about those concessions at some point and whether they were the right ones or whether they could be done better. And so I'm really interested in that. It's a weird, like I'm supposed to be like, rah, rah, everything's going awesome. Everything is going awesome at Query. It's just like, yeah, this is just the more interesting stuff to talk about.
Michelle?
I was just typing update, same thing. So this is what I do. Remember before I was like, I'm not good at seeing the thing in the corner, but then I do all that. Okay. Anyways, there's a group in IPFS. They've been calling themselves like a UX, I don't know, they meet for a half hour every couple of weeks, and I mostly miss them because reasons. But they're concerned with kind of the same stuff, Brendan. I maybe should see if they want to transfer their brain to this meeting and just have everyone work together, or there's some subset of Data Together that wants to deep dive specifically on usability and like user interactions on the distributed web, and use that as that space for the thing, that might be a good thing. So, and one of them's, I don't know if you know Dietrich. Do you know Dietrich? He was at Mozilla. Yeah, so one of them's Dietrich, which is, lovely. And then he knows all the people at Mozilla. So he's always like, oh, I'm going to go ask so-and-so about whatever, and then brings that information back. So it's a good connection piece. Yep. Cool. I will try to take an action to bother them about that. Or no, I'm going to go on mute. Someone else note, and I'm going to type it in Slack right now. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. So someone else talk. Bye.
Jackson?
Yeah, I would love to participate in any UX conversations about like basically how to educate, maybe educate is the wrong word, but introduce like P2P paradigms of like interacting with technology to like a broader audience. I think so. Like I work at Coinbase right now, and like one of the biggest barriers to adoption for cryptocurrencies has nothing to do with any of the technical aspects of a blockchain, and has everything to do with UX. Like it is very difficult to get involved. Like setting up a wallet for like your crypto is such a pain, and you have to like memorize like a 12-word mnemonic, which is just wild. So yeah, I've been thinking a bunch about that. I've also just been working at, like as a UX engineer for a long time now, and I have spent a lot of time developing a lot of different, usually web UIs and interfaces, but have spent a lot of time thinking about that. And I would love to talk with other people about how to make this accessible, like how to make this something that people can intuitively grasp and start using without needing to read a manual or have a friend hold their hand.
I think that sounds really cool. I also like to work on UX stuff and have in the past for a job, so I'm into it. It does feel like an interesting thing to try to figure out logistically with how Data Together generally operates. And it feels like it might be like the sort of thing that folks spin up into a meeting that is not an official Data Together meeting. I don't know, maybe just to try it out at least. Does anyone want to take ownership on that idea? Brendan?
Yes, I'm really unreliable.
Yeah, I'm going to try and, so here's what I propose. Query meets every Monday at 2. We alternate dev and developer and user calls. I think it would be really fun to just wash one of those away completely and call it a data together call. And so if nobody shows up, then we'll just have a query call. But I don't know if that time's amenable to everyone. I'd also be amenable to circulating a doodle poll to see if others can make something. That's 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. But yeah, I totally could throw something on the schedule and use either Coinbase or anything else as a guinea pig. And we say, cool, we're going to talk about this. And we're just going to like have a fairly unstructured discussion. This is very easy to run. So I'd be happy to circulate a doodle. But I could also just propose that 2 p.m. time slot because it'll happen.
I love the idea of using an existing meeting. You're on. Can you send something out to the mailing list? Thank you.
I'll do my best. If I just have a backup to like, maybe somebody automate a ping that comes from you to me every day. Did you do it yet? Then I will actually do it. I'm really sorry. I'll see what I can do. Or put the time in, I'll try to get Dietrich and folks. Anyways, we'll work it out. Thank you.
With that, do we want to shift into the logistics for the meeting? And gosh, you were right, Brendan. This call does get eaten up. Go ahead.
Cool. Thanks so much, Kelsey. Yeah, and so some stuff I wanted to cover for the meeting. We have formally picked the dates. That is correct. Yes, we're a day and a half. We have the dates on the calendar. It's somewhere. With that day and a half, there are a couple of things that we definitely need to cover. I think what we'd like to do this time is like actually take some of the lead that we've been talking about at Veggie and like use a good chunk of that time for like working progress and like actually try and have a good couple of sessions that like say, cool, we're going to take some time and everyone's going to attack a blog post or convert our something to Jekyll. But there's some high level like agenda, like sort of constitutional things that I think we should surface at this meeting. And the biggest one that I've been hearing as I've been having more of these conversations is growing the circle of people that are either members or whatever it means to be a member of Data Together. Just so that we can make sure that other organizations that I think are around and well worth sort of inviting to the project should have a voice and have a method and have a clear, we have a clear understanding of how we can sort of grow that circle. In particular, I know that we'll have Mauve from the DAP project joining us. And I'd like to serve as inviting some other folks from Code for Science and Society, which is the organization that tends to help support a lot of the DAP project. But I do think it's a very important part of this annual meeting that we surface and figure out how we grow the circle. That to me is something that I'd like to get on the agenda. And so I wanted to say that now so that others could be prepared for it. And then one other thing I'd like to sort of surface for discussion, we'd initially proposed the idea of having people, holding some space for people to present topics and have them recorded. Basically just saying, the theory was, if people are interested, I think it would be really fun to take a morning to do little 20-minute talks that cover a topic that you think is really interesting and related to the Data Together conversation. The theory here being, we would record it, we would leave with something really fun that we could put on the website that is sort of speaks to some of our physical convening. This is very low key and very small. And our theory on it was that if you had something that you felt would be worth chatting about, you could just sort of like opt in. Otherwise, we could sort of goad a few people into making sure that we had at least like 2 or 3. But I wanted to sort of surface that as whether people were interested in that, whether that feels like too much to sort of prep a talk. But I, for one, would love to sort of just throw 20 minutes at the wall to talk about stuff that I think is really fun and relevant to Data Together. Kevin.
Was the idea that a person talks for 20 minutes, or they talk like for half the time and there's discussion, or is it free form? Or
great question. Maybe we could do, I don't know. I think we would, well, yeah, it could be either, depending on what the person wanted to do with their time. This is just a proposal. Kevin, if you think that we should do one or the other, I'm totally down for either.
I just don't feel like we're all together and just having to listen to one person for 20 minutes is not the best use of time if we're not together a lot.
Yeah, and so what if we took it like even a completely different direction, said like 5 minutes of like a lightning question instead of a lightning talk, and like proposing a problem space and then 15 minutes of discussion.
It sounds a bit to me like an unconference.
Yeah, that was very much the intention. Was I thought we should take half a day and just do like basically a live version of the reading group, but instead of having force everybody to read in advance, just everybody bring something to discuss and then use that as a jump off point. But have one person like be forced to be prepared with like a good question that, or a good topic to talk on. Anybody interested? Does this sound nutty? It's half a day, so it is.
But it sounds really hard to execute well. Like I'm thinking about books that I'm reading right now that would be appropriate to present on or have a discussion about, but I think it'd be really hard to go up, like I could go up and tell you about that book for probably an hour, but
right.
Then you would have like a question about my take on the book, not about the book per se.
Totally.
Maybe less presentation, more exercise, workshop, something like that, if there's something that we want to go in that direction with. So we're not all, watching one person. It wouldn't be the same as what we do in our discussion, but it'd be something.
Yeah, immediately that feels better, closer. I totally agree with you, Kelsey, and Kevin, the idea of just keeping it focused on discussion instead of on presentation. I just kept thinking about the website and how there's those YouTube videos, but who cares?
We could probably steal the, like some of the questions that we had that were good and had more to discuss from the old conversations and just like use those as spark for just continuing the conversation, especially like the civics one had a bunch of stuff. I've been reading about a bunch of stuff about like alternatives to capitalist structures and what it does to us. And I want to continue those. I've already added to their GitHub dead issues.
Yeah, I think, okay, so how do we feel about this? We do a reading group in review and we cull some questions from it and and just like use a half a day to do discussion on the reading group. Take some decent notes, enjoy each other's time. But
Yeah.
Cool.
That's the salon part of the
Salon.
activity. Left bank in the East River or whatever. I don't know where we're going to be.
Amazing. Okay, so then let's do that. The one other thing I wanted to sort of, okay, cool. So I think I think we should just use a half day to do the salon.
If we have a salon though, then we also need maybe some painting or like a harpsichord. I'm not really sure, but we're going to have to work on this a little.
Yeah, I'm going to need a biscuit of some kind.
You need like
Some tea.
absinthe as well, right?
I think so. Yeah, that seems like.
Jackson's got it.
Yeah.
What? Do you have absinthe? You have honey and absinthe? Amazing. Cool. Okay, so then I think that really helps us set the schedule. That means we have half a day for the salon. We will totally cover that, and then I would like to dedicate at least 3 hours of work on our website, just like getting our website act together. How many times have we mocked something up, done this, done that? Just like 3 hours where we work on the website and we submit pull requests and just like ship some of this stuff. I think that would be really nice. And then that's basically, so if that's 3 hours, then we have the time. Imagine that's like the afternoon of the full day, or sort of the later half of the afternoon of the full day. And we just have the sort of like partner discussion and sort of annual meeting stuff that we have to cover generally, which is ratifying any new members who want to join, making sure that we have quorum on stuff. I think we have at least some vision and valuing stuff that needs to be covered. Michelle?
Sorry, I realized it should be writing all this down. Then I was like, wait, do you have a draft agenda somewhere that I can just add notes to? Does that exist anywhere or no?
I don't think we do. I think we've been working on it just like in notes that are too scattered.
Very somewhere. Okay, I'll try.
Yeah.
My brain is not good at keeping up with the half days, which days, all the things. So I can try to get that down in here, or if you have one or almost have one, if you could send that out and then we can
I think
that'd be awesome.
As the people who are hosting, I think it's on us to make sure that we assemble the agenda and put something together as a proposal. But and so totally. The other stuff that we do need to cover that is actually quite vital that wasn't discussed at length here is just like the administration aspect that we need to cover in that sort of good chunk of the day. And we'll try to parse that out as needed and send that in advance. But what I did want to do is leave room for, does anybody think there should be on that discussion? Is there any topic that someone would expect to see at that discussion going into this conversation?
I think we have an official decision-making process, though I don't actually know where to find it. I don't think we are super clear about what is and isn't a Data Together activity or what membership means if you are not an organization. It would be good to surface, if not necessarily resolve that stuff.
Yeah, I was gonna say a lot of the questions Jackson had at the beginning about like, what's a new person supposed to do and what's their on-ramp is like questions we should answer. And like, what's the difference between an individual and an organization and how do they, because Jackson's not an organization. So like if you wanted to join, like what does that look like? Or can he?
My personal emphatic answer is yes. But okay, great. I'm hearing conversations around community engagement. Rob, do you have your hand up? Sorry.
Just related to that, not to open a giant can of worms, but it's possibly worth rethinking the organizational structure in light of that, because they're individual members, but they have no say in anything.
Totally. I think that's worth, I think we have to have this discussion because it sort of is the like intersection of what are people asked to do when they show up? Well, okay, well, does it become a member? What does that mean? And then on the other side is like, well, then what are the responsibilities of partner organizations to support this and who owns this stuff and who is, like, as Kelsey mentioned, like Edgy's been sort of organizing a lot of the meetings. So like we haven't really been rotating that. And so we have to figure that out. So yeah, I think that is something we should table. I ideally would love to, we're not gonna have a ton of time. So I want to make sure that we can push some of that conversation forward asynchronously so that others can see it as before it gets there. And I know that we often say this and like don't actually do it, but in this case, I think if we're actually going to make real progress on the membership question and the sort of like constitutionality or whatever you want to call it, I think we actually have to like get some proposals forward before the meeting itself. Michelle.
Do you want to try to squeeze in some remote facilitated conversations or something like that? Get something on the calendar to go through all that. I don't know if that's easier or more difficult for people. For me, that's easier because unless I have something on the calendar, it doesn't happen. For other people, that might not actually be the easier thing to do. Maybe super async is better, but that's an option. I would be happy to say, oh, 2 hours on whatever day, we're going to write a document together about X or whatever it is we need to do.
Which is great. We have had this issue in the past. We do need to make sure that we have at least one person from each of the 3 orgs if we're going to do it. And if we don't have that, then we don't have quorum. If we don't have quorum, then we run into this problem of nobody has the authority to move forward.
Well, what if people can, forget, what's the word? Can people not abstain, but like say, oh, we can't make it, but we trust you, or like we'll do a quick run afterwards or something like that? There could be a stop valve or a gap or whatever. I'm not using the right words, but send something out that's like, okay, well, if you can't make it,
then you proxy to.
Yeah, exactly. You have proxied it out.
Yeah, and I think as long as that's explicit and understood, that what our job is to try and make sure that with the agenda that we set forth gives us something we can talk about. And this is sort of a planning subcommittee.
Exactly.
That. We don't need to use that language. Go ahead, Michelle. Sorry.
So I was talking over you. We can use the Funlimio trick. It's what is it they do? Thumbs up, abstain. I want to talk about this, and like blocking. This cannot move forward. You shall not pass. We actually really need to talk about this thing to understand where people's concerns are. So yeah, we could do that if you like.
Totally. I think that's great. And I think that just to like put some framing around this conversation, or instead of saying constitutionality, I think we should hold in mind the idea of like the questions Jackson asked at the beginning of this, like, and the question around like, how do we make sure that other people who show up feel included and welcome in this? And what does that mean, given particularly as related to our like goal of like, let's not be this giant do everything work. And what like the thing that I also really care about is like, how do we get projects like Code for Science and Society excited and part of this space? So those 2 I think are the big things that I'm looking, and ideally, Rob, does that, oh, it's a puppy. Rob, does that help at least sort of get this on the agenda to move things forward? I feel like this is moving in the right direction.
Yeah, sure. I have no specific thoughts about any of it other than to say in that space, that's maybe worth thinking about or talking.
I agree. Okay, cool. So we'll, I will take the lead on making sure that the doodle poll to schedule that meeting gets sent out. I think we should, considering the meeting is in a month. Kelsey.
Oh, just you mentioned Code for Science and Society, and Mauve has been at these Data Together calls, and I think I'll make sure that he's officially invited, but I think I've already invited him at some point.
Yeah.
But he's a contractor for DAT, so he might not have the sway. Would you like me to also invite Carissa from Code for Science and Society? I have her contact.
I would love that. Yeah,
okay.
Personally. We all okay with that? Everyone okay with that? Chris is delightful. I think if she can make it, that'd be awesome. I think it could all be better for it. Yeah, and in general, I think I'd also like to reach out to Danielle Robinson, who is also at DAD. And Caitlin Thaney is also in Brooklyn and on the chair of Code for Science and Society, or on the board of Code for Science and Society. So I can chat with her as well. She just had a kid, so maybe not super available. Yeah, cool. So I think we have some like the hustle leading into this thing, into the annual meeting. If anybody on this call, if you want to come, you should come. You should definitely feel welcome, and you should come and help us figure out some of these questions. I'm super fired up. It's going to be a great conversation. Details to follow, but thank you everyone for helping us figure out what will be the agenda for our day and a half. There will be absinthe in a parlor or salon. Jackson.
Are people going to Radical Networks as well? I see that's like right before the meeting time.
Yeah, a number of us are going to be. Yeah, and so if you have any, are you going?
I'm trying to figure out what's happening in my life in October, yes. So very likely. DevCon is also on my plate as well. So I'm just trying to move all the pieces around and see how they fit together right now.
Awesome. Obviously, zero pressure from our end. We're delighted to have you on a call. And so it's no worries. Cool. Kelsey, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, actually, I have one more follow-up logistical question on that. Although really great timing that, Brendan. 3:58 over here. And the question is just, since several of us will be flying, and do we want to try and look at coordinating places to stay as a larger group, or as a maybe edgy subset is easier, but I would like to be inclusive if possible.
Yeah, I was planning on circulating that in an email, but yeah, we should totally chat about building. I definitely have a couch and an air mattress, and so definitely can host some folks. But we can also, coordinate travel, and then we should start to take attendance on who's coming and make sure they're all accommodated. So yeah, feel free. I'm Brendan at query.io. If you have any question about attending and you need a place to stay, anything, shoot me an email, and we'll make sure that you're taken care of. Michelle.
For those of you who are in New York, because I'm not, do you know what part of town both the Radical Networks thing is in and where we will be at for our meetings? Maybe not is the answer. You might not know, but if you do.
We know where the meetings are, and we can actually move the location of the meetings if it's more convenient to folks, because we will be hosting the meeting at a WeWork. And so there is a 80% chance we will host it at our WeWork in Dumbo, because we know the staff here and we can get access to a larger room if we need it.
I don't know that word. Yeah. What part of the New Yorks is that word?
Across some bridges. It's in Brooklyn, but it's
okay. I know that word.
Very
Thank
close
you.
To Manhattan.
Yeah. Thank you. That's a word I recognize. Thank you.
No worries. We will help you out. Stuff will be circulated and we will, for all this, we will email the Data Together group. So anybody, if you're on there, and if you're not,
all good. It was really just me being lazy because you were on the call, and I was like, you could probably just tell me right now, and then I don't even have to look. So thank you.
I haven't looked up the Radical Networks venue. I think it's moved, so we'll have to take a look. But
what? That's what DEMBO stands for?
Yeah.
Wow.
Right.
Okay.
Real estate. New York real estate. It's weird.
All right. So we will look forward to further information from Brendan, Rico, and/or someone else from Query. And I'm really excited. Do it soon. I want to buy tickets. Cool. Thanks everybody for joining today and going through this extremely varied meeting. That's all we have.
And you got a bonus link. You can go look. There was a thing on the radio, and it relates to distributed web and underprivileged groups. So anyways, it was great. Depressing and wonderful at the same time. So if anyone knows the people that are involved in that effort, it's kind of related. But bringing broadband to native lands, basically. And then, of course, the apparent ridiculousness that's happening and related to big companies and FCC. But I imagine some of you maybe know people involved. Anyways, there you go. But it's a fun bonus link for you to read during dinner or lunch or dessert or whatever.
Thanks, Michelle. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Michelle. It's so good to see everybody.
For all.